reported that the GDP growth jumped to 6.2% in the third quarter, as shown on the screen, from 5.5 in the second quarter. But again, it is not enough to reach its target, which is 7 to 8%, as stated in the BSF. Now, it is also worthy to note that during the DBCC hearing, Secretary Pernia of NEDA stated that their outlook for this year is at 6 to 7. It has been adjusted already.
That's
So
correct,
my
Mr.
question is,
President, yes.
and it's the low end of the 6 to 7 project
That we are aiming for, yes, Mr.
as
President.
adjusted. So can we still achieve the 6 to 7, the low end of 6 to 7% GDP, given the situation? And the next question is how so?
We have to hit 6.7, Your Honor, in the last quarter to achieve the 6%, the lower end, as you mentioned.
Yes, but yeah, how so? How?
If
What
we
is the
achieve
basis for that projection?
Because the first half of the year, we achieved the 5.55% growth, 5.5 in the first quarter, then 5.6 in the second quarter. And then in the third quarter, we got to 6.2. So to get the 6% at the end of the year, for the full year, we need to hit 6.7 in the fourth quarter, Your Honor.
And it is within the trajectory.
That's the hope of our economic managers seated next to us here, and they're really ramping up the spending, and we've reminded them that it's crucial that the money released, well, the DBM says it has released, I think, 90% of the budget, so it's up to the agencies really to get the projects going, Your Honor.
Yeah, can you enumerate some factors that would contribute to the realization of the low end of the 6 to 7?
Well, I think agriculture is always crucial, Your Honor. That's why the third quarter growth of 6.2% surprised a lot of people. Is because for the first time in a while, the agriculture sector grew by 3.1% in the third quarter.
From 2.87,
It's usually below 1%,
Yeah,
Your
below
Honor,
1%.
historically, yes.
And now it rose in the third quarter.
Opo, tumaas ng
It rose
3.1. Maraming nagulat
dramatically.
ho. Maraming nagulat din ho.
Ano na nga ulit tinaas ng sa agricultural sector?
3.1%, Your Honor.
3.1%. It rose by 3.1% or rose to 3.1%?
Rose by 3.1% over the
3.1%.
previous performance. And it's a low base, as mentioned by Senator Recto in passing.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. The debt to GDP ratio. Okay. Based on the Philippine Development Plan, PDP 2017 to 2022, the end-of-plan target for outstanding national government debt stock as a share in GDP is at 35.4%, as shown on the screen, 35.4.
Are we on target?
But then we see from the DBM fiscal year 2020 briefer that you have adjusted it to 38.8. The actual GDP or the actual debt to GDP ratio for 2018, again as shown, nasa 41.9. No? Lahat off sa target. Are we saying that we won't be able to reach our 2022 target based on the PDP 2017 to 2022? Because ang target natin, 35.4. Pero pag tinignan natin dyan sa screen, nasa 38.8 na yung projection. So is it still achievable, Mr. President?
Yung 35 or yung 38? What's achievable? They are saying they had to revise the target. So what's achievable is the 38.8, Your Honor.
Yeah, that's the new target.
Yes, Your Honor.
But-
According to them, it's still achievable.
It's still achievable.
Yes, Your Honor.
Paano kaya?
Well, they'll have to control the borrowings, and of course, the revenues are a crucial factor in this because the balance comes from your cash collection. So that's important. Yung revenue collection po ng ating mga revenue agencies mahalaga po.
Control the borrowings. I'll show you later.
Opo.
We'll discuss later the national government borrowings. Now, next slide. And never mind that. That was discussed already. Next slide. Yung adherence to fiscal sustainability. Okay, expansionary as stated there, fiscal policy to sustain the government investments in infrastructure and human capital development. Ito, yung gap between the revenue effort, which is at 17.2%, and the disbursements to GDP at 20.4%. Medyo malaki yung gap, ano? And our deficit target is at 3.2%.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, how do we narrow the gap between the revenue effort and the disbursements to GDP?
Well,
Ano bang,
that's a perennial problem, and the gentleman raises it every year and holds the agencies to account, and he deserves credit for that. But again, the DBM says it is meeting with the different agencies to speed up the disbursements, and on the revenue side, I think what is crucial for the administration are the remaining tax reform packages, Your Honor.
Tax reform, and we are still struggling to pass the pending legislation, di ba?
There's
Sa
a
alcohol and
pending.
tobacco.
The House has passed the excise tax on the sin products
Yeah.
and the additional cigarettes, and it has also passed the CITIRA, which is the rationalization of fiscal incentives and lowering of corporate income tax, as well as the taxes on passive income, Your Honor.
So what happens if we do not pass the two measures, CITIRA and the
Well,
sin
we will
tax?
be short of the revenue projection by 20 billion. Is the,
By 20
is the
billion.
estimate, Your Honor.
What happens if we adopt the House version, which would raise taxes as far as the alcohol and tobacco? I think yung version nila is at 16, 16.3, no? 16.3%, 16.3 billion.
You'll be short 4 billion. My estimate is they'll be short 4 billion, Your Honor, because 40 billion less 16. That 20 is already the one we passed. We'll be short 15.
Yun na lang.
So 15 plus.
Yan na lang.
So what is the short? What do you expect to raise from the House? And you're projecting? The House version raises around 16 billion, Your
Yes,
Honor.
16.3 billion.
And then the Senate version raises around 45. So the difference is around 29 billion, Your Honor.
So ano po yung impact kung ang masunod yung House version? Kasi ang House version would raise a total of 16.3. Pagka DOF version naman yung na-adapt, ano, nasa gitna, I think it's at 31 plus billion.
Opo.
And then kung yung Senate, very ambitious, nasa mga 47 billion, I
40
think.
plus, ho.
So medyo i-dissect natin ng konti. Kung yung House version na masunod, anong impact?
Well, according to USEC Chua, there will be a shortfall for UHC of around...
Sa implementation. Ano yung gap?
Shortfall of around 30 to 40 billion, Your Honor.
30 to 40.
Yes.
And we're okay with the DOF version, which would raise around 31.2 billion.
Well, that's their preference. The DOF prefers the DOF version, Your Honor.
Not even the Senate version, which would raise 47 billion.
It's even better according to them.
Okay, anyway. Next slide na lang yung sa national government financing because we mentioned kanina yung borrowings. Ano. If you notice, ito yung gross borrowings natin sa 2018 na lang para may example tayo. No? 897 billion yung gross borrowings. Ano. Pag binawas mo yung amortization na 114, ang net financing, ang balance, nasa mga 783.3. Pero ang requirement lang natin sa net financing requirements para nasa 558.3. So why are we borrowing more than what we need to finance? Is that a sound practice, Mr. President?
Sorry, there was whispering. What's the question, Your Honor?
The question is,
Yeah.
if you can see on the screen, ano,
Yes, Your
yung gross borrowings natin sa 2018, and pareho rin naman ang pattern in the succeeding year, 2019, pati yung projection sa 2020, 21, 22.
Opo.
Ang gross borrowings, nasa mga 897.6 billion. Yun na actual, ano?
Opo.
Alisin mo na yung amortization na 114. Ang net financing natin for 2018, 783.3 billion. Pero ang requirement lang natin, financing requirement natin, is only at 558. Question is, sobra ng 225,
Yung borrowing.
is that a sound policy to borrow more than what we need? Kasi kung uutang tayo, necessarily merong interest na babayaran. Kung hindi naman natin gagamitin, ba't tayo uutang na mas malaki doon sa kailangan nating i-finance?
According to the National Treasurer, what is not indicated, Your Honor, is the bond sinking fund which they contribute to every year.
What is that, Mr.
The
President?
bond sinking fund. What? Can you explain to me all that?
What's that animal? Hindi ko naintindihan.
Yeah, I'm also wondering where in the zoo we can find that, Mr. Mr. President.
As provided by we have on chief to be able to service our maturities, particularly for the domestic banking.
It's a fund that answers for our future maturities of our borrowings, Your Honor, our sovereign borrowings. For domestic borrowings, Your Honor. Mr. President, the
Mr. President.
Senate's resident economist is raising his hand, Your Honor.
Yeah, Mr. President, I looked at the same numbers, no? And just to intervene with the permission of the sponsor and the interpolator, and it's very good that Senator Lacson brought this out. In effect, what this means is that we are building up cash. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. We're planning for the future, for our future maturities, our future obligations,
Yeah,
Your
we're
Honor.
building up cash. But I have one simple question, Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Lacson. Okay, isn't it in the BESF, whether it's a local government, we always have beginning cash balance, ending cash balance.
Usually,
take a
yes.
look at
Yes,
the BSF,
usually, yes, Your Honor.
right? As far as the national government is concerned, and that's why Senator Lacson, I suppose, is asking this question, is what is our beginning balance and what is our ending balance by the end of
For 2018, Your Honor,
for 2018,
Yeah.
2019, 2020?
we will
Why
ask
is
for the
it not
figures.
in the BESF? Because that determines how much cash you need.
May we ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr.
One
President?
last point before we
Yes, yes.
suspend. Even if you take a look at the BSF, all local government units in the country, we know what their beginning balance is, we know what their end year balance is.
Yeah.
Cash, huh? Cash.
Yes, Your Honor.
We take a look at the SUCs. We know their beginning balance, we know what their end year balance
That's right,
will be.
that's right, Mr.
Every
President.
university. But as far as the national government is concerned, it is not there. So how do we reflect these changes in cash? What do we compare it with? Dapat yan yung end year balance, beginning year balance. So on and so
Mr. President,
forth
may
and
we
so
ask for a
forth.
1-minute suspension
Yes,
with
thank
the
you.
indulgence of the gentleman on the floor?
Session suspended.
Take your time, guys. Take your time. Take your time. Hindi. 3 to 6 weeks lang. Si Baines, same injury, 4 weeks lang. Last year. Broken talaga yung fracture. About the basketball. Si Gordon Hayward. The guys are bigger and stronger. It's too big, it's too big. Mahirapan siya sa college, you play less games than the pros. Boss, ganda ng outfit natin. Pogi. Pwede na. Mr. President, ready to resume?
Session resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Tatang mic,
I think there was a question on the borrowing and the cash position of the government, and I think Senator Recto is satisfied.
Well, Mr. President, I was informed, in effect, that there are confidential matters with
But it
regard.
will affect the position of the government vis-a-vis some of the lenders and that they would rather not discuss it out in the open, Your Honor.
Publicly, yes. But my personal thinking on the matter is that if we did have a very good cash position, and that should be communicated to the public.
Well,
So that's all. That's
the
my
decision
only
of the,
statement, Mr. President. So I do not fault. I
yes.
do not fault, and I've seen that too, Senator Lacson, because it would appear that we're over borrowing. Because
Your
if the deficit for next year is how much? 677 billion.
677, Your Honor.
And you're borrowing more than that, then in effect, what we're doing is building up your cash position.
The gentleman answered his own. He
Correct.
said because they're taking advantage of low interest rates.
Correct.
And
But the point is, we've been doing that for the last 3 years. And that's why Senator Lacson compared it to the original plan that the debt to GDP should be lower by now.
Yeah.
That was the
Correct.
point of Senator
Yes.
Lacson. Thank you very much.
He's
Mr.
correct,
President.
Your Honor. He's correct. Yeah.
Can we laymanize the... Kasi alam nyo, kami dalawa ni Senator Bato, Economics 101 lang. Inabot namin, Economics 411 lang nung first class cadets kami. So, if I were a businessman wanting to invest, say, 100 million pesos, capital outlay, tapos pang additional operational expenses, why would I borrow 150 million or 200 million? Yun lang ang gusto ko maintindihan
Opo.
without discussing yung sinabi niyo mga confidential matters
Honor.
that need not be discussed here. But ganun lang kasimple yung takbo ng utak, kaya hindi ko rin maintindihan bakit we are borrowing more than what we are supposed to be financing.
Yes, Your Honor. They're taking advantage of a low interest regime. Ibig sabihin, mababa po yung halaga ng binabayad sa interest ngayon around the world, whether it's domestic or foreign. Kaya kung siya'y negosyante, yung gobyerno natin po, to use your analogy, Your Honor, kung negosyante po siya, meron siyang utang na babayarin in the coming years. Ipunin na niya ngayon kasi in the future, hindi niya alam ano yung magiging interest rate. So, maaring tumaas, maaring it will stay low. But in the meantime, para sigurista siya, habang mababang interest, hawak na niya po yung pera. Kung baga bird in hand is better than two in the bush.
Okay, that sounds rational, Mr. President. What's budgetary change in cash form, Mr. President? Yung budgetary cash change in cash.
That's invested according to them in government securities, Your Honor. So it is the
So you're borrowing and you're investing.
they're reinvesting. So kumikita rin sila, Your Honor. Hindi nila
So-
hawak lang yung pera, hindi lang nakatenga sa bangko yon.
And secure naman yung investment. di ba?
Government securities, ho.
Yeah, okay. Government securities.
Opo.
So that's the... Sige.
Again, Mr. President, with the permission. Ang pagkaintindi ko dyan, Mr. President, correct me if I'm wrong, yung 225 billion is, the deficit is 558 in 2018. They borrowed 225 billion more than the deficit. Okay? The deficit in 2019 is 620. They plan to borrow more by 426. The deficit in 2020 is 677. They plan to borrow more, additional of 564. Kaya yung net financing nasa taas. And that will build up the cash position of the national government.
The answer is yes, Your Honor, but not exactly the numbers. Bababa rin ho, according to them.
No, depende kasi program lang naman yan.
Opo, opo.
Okay? And the actual.
But
that's the
roughly it's
plan.
the same, ho. It's roughly the same.
That's the plan,
Opo,
right?
opo.
Okay? And that's why I was asking earlier, magkano ba talaga yung cash ngayon? But I understand, what you're
The
saying.
Secretary of Finance will give it to you in a sealed envelope.
Thank you very much,
Your
Mr.
Honor.
President.
Okay. On tax, kanina na-discuss natin yung sa tax revenues, ano? And I'd like to point out, because we did some fact-checking, ano? And there are some interesting revelations do sa leakages. Number one, and I already mentioned this during the DBCC committee hearing, yung products imported from China in 2017, because para mag-apples to apples, lahat ng papakita namin, yung data in the 2017, in year 2017. If you look at the slide, yung as reported by the Philippines, ang pumasok sa ating goods from China, imported from China, $18.4 billion. No? But as reported by China, and the source here is yung WITS, on World Bank's World's Integrated Trade Solution. Ano? As reported by China, ang in-export nila sa Pilipinas, 32 billion. So right away, we can see a discrepancy of 13.5 billion pesos, dollars. And ang rate noong 2017 is 50.4 pesos to a dollar. So immediately, pag kinumpute natin yung VAT na lang of the 684.8 billion pesos times 12% VAT, nawala na tayo agad ng, o may leakage tayo ng 82.1 billion. That's not all, ano? Because we also got the records from Korea, yung importation from Korea. As reported by the Philippines, $8.8 billion yung in-import natin from Korea. As reported by Korea, 10.5 billion. So meron na naman difference o discrepancy na 1.7 billion or 89 billion pesos at same rate, ano? Kasi it's same year. Times 12% VAT, nawala na naman tayo ng 10.7 billion. Another one, products imported from Hong Kong, the same thing. Ano? Nawala na naman tayo, revenue loss of 4.757 billion. Again, products imported from the US in 2017, nawala na naman tayo ng 853 million pesos. So, and then, kung narinig natin yung, yan, mukhang bata pa si Jose Carl dyan, pero kakakausap sa mga congressman, senador. Anyway, ito yung statement niya. I presented in the tax reform hearings in more than 500 ecozones in the Philippines. All are separate customs territories with possibly a lot of leakage. Ano? Ang computation niya sa leakage in 2017 alone, 63 billion pesos. So to sum it all up, dito pa lang, hindi pa natin wala pa yung sa Middle East, wala pa yung ibang countries. Ito lang yung mga big trading partners natin. Ang revenue loss natin or leakage, and this involves tax administration, 161.5 billion pesos. Now, question, are there efforts to plug the leakages? Kasi baka hindi na natin kailangan yung additional syntaxes kung mapaplag natin itong leakages. Because right away, we can collect an additional 161.5 billion doon lang sa pinakita nating importations from a few countries, ano? For that matter, China, US, Korea, Hong Kong.
Yes, Your Honor, it's a very valid point, and according to the Secretary of Finance, they're trying their best. I think there's been some increase in administrative efficiency, but somewhat minimal. But according to the Secretary of Finance, the discrepancy between the declarations is because China declares as exports even goods for transshipment, meaning if the goods are sent to the Philippines but bound for Australia, for instance, they are still declared as an export, whereas we don't declare if it's just passing through as transshipment. It's not declared as an import on our end, Your Honor.
My point is, Mr. President, distinguished sponsor, if we go back to the previous slide, no, the actual deficit in 2017 was recorded at 350.6 billion pesos, equivalent to the 3.2 of the GDP. Yung pakibalik nga yung dating slide. 3 isa pa, balik pa. Yung 3.2%, ayan, no? Assuming that we were able to plug the 161.2 billion in revenue losses, anong magiging change? Anong impact nito sa budget deficit, sa ano natin? Sa
Kung na-plug
budget
ho natin
deficit?
yun?
Kung na-plug natin,
Baka wala na ho
magkano
tayong deficit at all.
well, 189 billion ang maging diferensya.
Kung
In other words,
677 sa 1/4,
instead
around
na
1/4.
3.2% yung deficit target natin,
Magiging
bababa ito sa
2.4 na lang.
1.7% of GDP. So you can just imagine if the tax administration of the national government is that efficient, ano, as we are able to plug big or huge leakages in the tax collection, laking bagay, hindi po
Yes,
ba?
Your Honor, we fully agree with you. And they're mentioning that they're trying to ramp up the fuel marking as an administrative measure, Your Honor.
Well, understand, nung nagsimula yung fuel marking, ang laki na nang na-plug. I think you have some data on that, ano? When you implemented the fuel...
They just started October, I think, Your
and
Honor.
magkano na yung incremental increase? Wala pa.
Bago pa lang ho, bago pa lang.
I would assume, hindi, pero may effect na rin siguro kagad.
We will ask for them for some figures, Your Honor.
Yeah, sige. Okay.
End of the year.
Wag na tong train revenue performance kasi masyadong, ano na,
They will see in the next few months, Your Honor, when they
Okay.
see when they compare the month by month
Yeah. Thank
collections of fuel ho.
ito, just to be transparent, ito po yung pinanggalingan ng mga pinakita ko kaninang mga figures. Ano? Yung World Integrated Trade Solution, andyan lahat po yan. Nakikita naman natin, naka-record lahat. Hindi ko po kami nag-iimbento ng numero. Just to show
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, next topic would be yung budgetary deficit, ano? Parang yung revenues against disbursements, kasi sa DBM's glossary of terms, yung budget deficit refers to the shortfall of revenues from disbursements, excluding, of course, debt repayments and payments on budgetary accounts, ano? Now, considering that disbursements come after the subject fiscal year, while obligations, iba yung obligation, di ba? Pag obligation,
Yes, Your
ito
Honor.
yung for the same,
Opo.
di ba, nasa special provision naman yan. Di ba mas tama na i-compute natin yung budget deficit as the difference between obligations and not disbursements. Kasi pag sinabing obligation, sayaw mo sa gusto, babayaran mo yun eh. Pero bakit kinocompute natin yung budget deficit sa difference between disbursement
But ang question niya, why not obligation instead of disbursement? Because it is a cash deficit according to the officials.
revenue-
And when you say
We're
it's a
talking of
cash basis,
revenue-
it's a cash basis, Your Honor. So it's the amount of money that leaves the treasury rather than obligation, which is just a contract. But you're correct; it's binding on the government, but
Yeah.
it does not represent the cash position of the government, Your Honor.
Okay. Yung tax revenue program. Okay. Year in and year out, ito yung situation natin. We never hit our tax revenue projections. Saan ba pwedeng ma-attribute ito? Aside from, of course, leakages. Ano?
Well, I think they set it quite high in the first place to incentivize the collectors to work hard, Your Honor. And but the Secretary of Finance is stating that the gap is shrinking. So he's trying to say they've been performing better over the years.
Okay, fair enough. Sige, skip na natin yung sa... Ito, let's go now to the budget, ano, yung 2020 proposed budget. Now, for the proposed 2020 budget, yung total disbursements, 4.213. No? 4.1 trillion, ito yung expenditure program. Hence, may difference tayong 113.8 billion. Pero yung gap should be funded by the unprogrammed appropriations amounting to 216. Andiyan, program appropriations, 216 billion pesos. Now, my question is, ano yung unprogrammed appropriations that you intend to fund the 113.8 billion? And a related question is, why is the unprogrammed appropriations higher than the supposed gap between disbursements and the expenditure program? May difference eh, oh. Mga 103 billion.
According to the LBMRO, the gap between the disbursements and the expenditure is not necessarily the unprogrammed appropriations for that year, Your Honor, because the disbursements can represent obligations for that fiscal year, but it can also represent previous year's obligations since we were not on a cash budget. So may mga accounts payable na nag-carry over, and that's counted in the disbursements, Your Honor.
Pero nasa cash-based budgeting na tayo eh. Although-
Opo, pero in the past years ho, nag-carry over pa rin ho yung, because
The reason I ask is because, you know, yung unprogrammed funds, hindi ito, wala sa radar natin ito eh, hindi natin na-discuss. And we want to find out, we just want to look into yung sa unprogrammed appropriations. And merong provision dyan sa GAA, merong reportorial requirement that every quarter, ayan, DBM shall submit to the Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, the House Committee on APRO, and Committee on Finance.
yes, Your Honor,
Quarterly report.
I agree
Are
with you.
they-
It's a large amount of money, and
Are
it
they
would be good.
submitting, are they complying with this?
Meron po. Nasa GAB ho. And just for the record, the 213 is broken down as support for infrastructure projects and social programs, SIPSP 10 billion, approximately AFP modernization, approximately 5 billion, budgetary support to government-owned controlled corporations, 61.8 billion, support to foreign-assisted projects, 90.3 billion approximately, risk management program, 30 billion, payment of arrears of LTO IT service, 2 billion, refund of service development fee for the right to develop the Nampedai property in Tokyo, Japan, 210 million approximately. Prior years LGU shares, 1.192 billion. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Equity Infusion pursuant to RA 11211, 2.7 billion. National ID System, 2.43 billion approximately. Normalization Program in the Bangsamoro, 5 billion. HFEP or Health Facilities Enhancement Program, 5.44 billion approximately, totaling the 200 billion or so. Mr.
It's all
President.
right. Kaya lang, hindi natin na-discuss na yan during budget deliberations, di ba?
Totoo po.
Kaya lang gusto kong just to put it on record.
Yes, Your
Now,
Honor.
which brings us to the next item, yung support for infra and social program. Ano? Next slide. There's a budget allocation amounting to 13.6 billion. Pero yung budgetary transfers to agencies from this item, 16.6 billion. Easily, there's an excess adjustment of 3 billion plus, 3.10 3 3,010,855,000. Now, ang tanong is, saan na-source yung excess na 3 billion?
They are looking for it right now, Mr.
Yeah, yung
President.
2018, ano? Where was the excess adjustment sourced from? Yeah. Twenty 18.
Mr. President, Your Honor, the amount referred to by Senator Lacson, the 3.01 billion approximately, was realigned from the risk management program budgeted for that year, Your Honor.
Risk management program.
Opo.
Now,
It's also under the unprogrammed appropriations.
ano ba yung support for infra projects and social program? Kindly enlighten us or define what it is. Support for infra and social program.
Well, the special provision in the GA says the amount appropriated herein for support for infrastructure projects and social programs, this is while we're waiting for the breakdown from DBM, Your Honor, is chargeable and used in support for infrastructure projects and social programs, such as but not limited to catastrophe bond. We're waiting for the breakdown from DBM,
Okay.
Your Honor. Wala kayo niyan. Wala kayong breakdown niyan.
Alam ko tinotal natin ito noon eh. 257. Parang 257 billion. Ano? Sige, mamaya na lang, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think they're having a problem retrieving the data, but we'll hold them to that
yeah, we can move
to
on.
submit it, Your Honor. We
Kasi
apologize for
the
that.
next question is related to borrowings. Ano? Sabi nga kanina, di-discuss natin, we're borrowing more than what we have programmed to spend. Ano? But then, if we look at the unused appropriations, and we're using the SAOB, yung 2017, no? If we unused, doon sa unused tayo. Unused appropriations, yan. Okay. Taking off from, sabi ni Secretary Jokno, yung definition na underspending, di ba? Program appropriations versus actual after 3 years. So, nag-refer tayo sa 2017 budget. If you notice, ito yung mga agencies na may mga unused. So, here we are, borrowing more than what we need kasi gusto nating mag-build up ng cash as you said. Pero taon-taon naman, ang lalaki ng hindi natin nagagamit sa budget. So it doesn't make sense because we borrow to use or to build up the cash position. Pero hindi rin natin, pag tinotal natin ito, I think ang estimate ng namin lumalabas na sa mga 257 billion. So why are we appropriating or enacting the appropriations measure tapos hindi naman din natin nagagamit yung full potential ng budget? 257 billion is a huge amount, ano?
Tama po, Mr.
Bakit
President.
kaya malaki yung unused?
It's a perennial problem yung underspending, and perhaps the appetite for spending has grown faster than the capacity to spend. That's the evidence presented by the gentleman. So kami naman ho sa komite, tinitingnan din ho namin yung mga agencies, and when we look at the needs like for free tertiary education, for PhilHealth, na andyan dyan na talaga yung pangangailangan, baka pwedeng ilipat dun sa mga ahensya na hindi talaga nagagamit based on their disbursement rate.
And I think it has something to do with planning, di ba? If you plan poorly, then you will not be able to utilize the appropriations as fast as enacted. And that brings me to my favorite topic. Kaya masama yung planning because hindi alam ng agencies. And the agency heads can attest to this, that sometimes there are items in their budget or lodged in their departments na hindi nila alam kung paano i-implement. Only because these are insertions made by legislators. And they were not consulted when these items or projects or PAPs were inserted in the budget. So ang result, hindi ma-implement. Pag hindi na-implement, may unused.
It's possible, Your Honor, that some of these projects included were not shovel-ready, so to speak.
Yeah. Not properly vetted, not
Yes.
properly planned. And therefore, so how do we cure this?
Ay, sorry, what's the question, Your Honor?
How do we cure? How do we remedy yung unused appropriations?
According to Director Toledo of NEDA, every cabinet meeting, si DBM Secretary Avisado is providing an update of the spending. So, nalalaman ng mga colleagues sino yung mga magagaling gumastos, sinong hindi. So, hopefully they're trying to incentivize them into spending faster, Your Honor.
Yeah, kasi perennial ito eh. Recurring ito every year.
Last 4 or 5
Di
years,
ba?
Your Honor, already.
No, not just the past 5 years. Even during the past 10 years, I remember, even during the previous administration,
True.
pumapalo tayo ng average unused appropriations ng nasa mga 450 billion.
Tama, Your
Medyo
Honor.
may improvement na nga kasi yung 2017, andyan, 257. But still, 257 in unused appropriations, doesn't sound good, as far as the fiscal program or expenditure program of the government is concerned. So ang tanong nga ulit, balik tayo, how do we remedy the situation?
I think it's a case-to-case basis kasi iba-iba yung rason ng mga ibang agencies, Your Honor. Like, as you mentioned, the planning is very important. Another is, I guess, really trimming the budget to the essentials, Your Honor, and not including items which are not likely to be spent or obligated or disbursed during the year.
Probably it's because yung RDC submitted PAPs, yung mga projects, hindi ina-adapt ng national government because the needs and priorities should be focused on the local development plans of the different LGUs, hindi ba?
Ideally, Your Honor, yes.
Kasi kung hindi naman kailangan ng mga local government units at ini-impose na lang sa kanilang national government, nagkakaroon ng unused because hindi nga kailangan eh.
I agree. There should be an improvement in the relations, in the communications, Your Honor, between the local and national levels.
And would you know what is the percentage of the RDC approved projects or PAPs compared to yung in-approve ng national government?
It's 25%.
Na-take up na rin natin to eh. I think si Yusek Rose ang sumagot dito. And you said 14% lang. Yung sinasabit
Nag-increase
ng
na daw ho. 14 during the DBCC, but it's 25 na daw.
25, I know it's
Opo.
25.
25,
Na-correct natin yung figures kasi yung ayan, sinabi ko 14%. But when we recomputed, lumalabas 25%.
Opo.
But 25% of RDC submitted projects or PAPs, masyado mababa pa rin. So there's a disconnect between the needs and priorities of the local government units and the spending program of the national government. So again, how do we narrow the gap or
Yeah, it's a good point, Your Honor, and Mr. President. We have the breakdown per agency. So some agencies are performing much better than the others. Like, for instance, we have the DTI at 72%. So maybe we have to, maybe the DBM can compare what is the DTI doing right, that they're managing to, what are their mechanisms for consultation and information gathering at the local level.
Ang reason na posited by Yusek Edilon, parang ang ginamit mong term is asynchronous, di ba? Hindi nga nakasync yung needs as submitted by the RDCs. Siyempre yung RDC, ang output yan gagaling sa mga local LDPs, di ba? Local Development Plans submitted by, maybe one reason could be yung incapacity of the local government units to prepare their respective local development plans. Kasi kung wala naman sila mga planning officers who know how to prepare an efficient local development plan, anong tatanggapin ng RDC? So maybe government should exert also an effort to capacitate the local government units, because just to avoid the big disconnect between the needs and priorities of the LGUs and the national government.
I fully agree with you, Mr. Gentleman from Cavite, because I've seen it on the ground that some
Yeah.
municipalities really don't have the manpower or the talent level because umalis na yung mga
How
ibang
many
graduates.
regions are compliant sa submission ng from RDC to the national, to DBM? Kasi DBM naman is kayo yung nag-chair ng RDC, hindi ba? NEDA. A vice chair ang DBM. But still, may presence kayo doon sa RDC. So,
Sabi nila lahat naman daw compliant, Mr. President.
parang sa record namin, Region 5 lang yung masipag mag-submit.
But anyway,
Para yung NCR,
yeah.
parang hindi sila nag-iintindi ng mga submission ng projects. Also Region 4A and I guess Region 3. Yung mga medyo angat yung kabuhayan ng mga regions, parang hindi sila interesado.
We will ask for the breakdown per region,
Yeah.
Mr. President. But
So I think we
it's
should
a valid
encourage-
concern. It's a very valid concern, and
Yeah.
I think the economic team should look at the performance of various agencies, especially in fulfilling the wishes of the locals, because that's part of democracy, Your Honor. And talagang mababa po yung performance ng ibang agencies. May 6%, may
Yes.
4%, whereas there are agencies which are at 72%, 64%. There's even
Yeah.
agencies which are 100%.
Andyan po yung
Opo.
nasa screen po yung.
Yes, opo.
Ayan, no? Imagine 0%, wala nagsasubmit sa NHA. Yung sa CHED, nanggaling sa RDC, 1%. DOH, 1%.
Yeah,
So,
they should perform
DepEd-
better, Your Honor.
Yeah. So I think there should be an extra effort to correct this situation.
Yeah, we agree, Your Honor.
Okay, build. Based on the available data submitted by NEDA, as of July 31 ito, of the 75 big-ticket projects amounting to 2.4 trillion, 20 are for project development, 4 are for government approval, 5 are for review, 46 are for implementation. Now, can you give us an update of these big ticket projects at saka ano naging impact sa Build program ng government kung do sa 2.4 trillion budget?
We also asked for that yesterday, Mr. President. We've
Ilan
not
na
been
yung-
furnished that list.
Ilan na yung talaga inabandon na? Parang surrender
Because
na.
they've been issuing, the NED has been issuing, and Secretary Pernia has been mentioning that they're going to revise the 75 kasi nakita nila hindi talaga ma-roll out yung iba. So nire-revise nila to more doable or shovel-ready projects. So we've been waiting for that
Yeah.
list actually, Mr. President.
Wala pang final list.
Yeah. They're still finalizing the final list, Your Honor. They have found that because of technical, financial, or economic non-viability, some are not implementation ready, Your Honor.
So anong impact nito sa, ano to parang flagship ito eh,
That's
ng administration, di ba? Ito yung pag-upo pa lang talagang, and it is a very good program, no, by the way. Kaya nga tayo nagre-resort sa massive borrowings kasi nga, that's for investment. We want to invest on infrastructure to attract more investments, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor. They're still
Eh,
firming
kung-
up the list, and they will submit it to the NEDA board for the approval.
And we still have 2.5 years to go. Bakit i-abandon yung, ba't abandon na natin?
Which are you deferring? Give me an example so we can mention. Some of the longer bridges, for instance, Your Honor, they're bigger cost items. So they're most likely going to defer those projects according to them.
And I would assume na meron namang sufficient study kung ano yung ROI. No matter how long the bridges and no matter how expensive they are, may sufficient study naman yung possible ROI in terms of investment, di ba?
They're doing that, Mr. President.
They're still doing that. Di ba dapat nauna pa yun? Di ba dapat nauna yun? Feasibility study.
You do it after the approval of NEDA. They do it before it's submitted to the NEDA board for approval, Your Honor.
And wala pa yung finalist and wala pa yung reasons for abandoning some of those 75 big ticket projects. Wala pa? We also want to find out the reason or
The
reasons
reasons
why.
are usually technical, financial, economic non-viability. So some of the longer bridges, according to them, they will not push through with those, or they'll defer them for later.
I would like to yield the floor to the minority leader kasi medyo pahinga muna ako, sponsor.
Thank you.
Nangangalati
Thank
pa
you.
lang ako eh.
Yes,
So,
sir.
siya na
We
muna.
owe you the
No, it's okay. It's
Thank
okay.
you,
breakdown.
Senator Lacson. Just on the point
Thank you very much,
of these,
Your Honor.
of these flagship projects, because that is, if I may, maybe allowed to intervene, just on
Yes,
this
of course.
point.
No, I'm suspending my interpellation and after
Okay,
you,
so
I can...
maybe I'll take it off first from these flagship projects. I have a number of questions. With the permission of Senator Lacson and if the
From where to where, Your Honor? Can you tell me?
good sponsor can yield. Just can we go back? Okay, on this build on
Of course,
this,
to the distinguished minority leader.
75 flagship projects. Is it correct to say that only 9 out of the 75 flagship projects have commenced in terms of actual construction?
That's correct, Mr. President.
And that is, and we barely have less than 3 years to go. So, how many more are we expected to start? How many more projects would be expected to start, and when will they be finished? And, okay.
He's talking about the 75. Sagot natin 100. Oh. Well, the revised list will be around 100 projects, Mr. President.
No, I'm just talking, we can have 1,000 projects, that's all theoretical. I am talking about how many
so he's
projects
just sticking to
have
the
been
list of
actually
75.
started in terms of construction. Because we can say that the project has started in terms of feasibility study. There's nothing to that in terms of the project contributing to our GDP. Because it is actual construction, when there are actual disbursements, that would propel our economy. That's why I'm interested, because we started in 3 years ago with 75 projects under our Build program. After 3 years, over 3 years, only 9 have been have
We're
commenced.
asking for the number that can be rolled out aside from the 9 at present, Minority Leader.
Sorry.
So 13 will be completed by 2020, 2021, 7. Ito yung
Completion to?
Yes,
Okay pa to? Hindi na-revise to? According to them, by 2020, 12 projects will be completed, Your Honor. By 2021, an additional 17. 2022, an additional 26. And 43 will be computed beyond 2022. Ano yung 1 na 2019? What is that 1?
All right.
I-list nyo. Ano yung 1? Ano yung 12? I-list nyo. Ano masabi natin?
Okay. So, other than what will be commenced next year in terms of actual construction? And in 2021?
Ganun yung sagot. I'm asking for specifics, Mr. President.
Sorry,
They're
sorry.
giving- I'm asking for specifics, but they're giving me numbers.
We can have a 1-minute suspension if you wish, so that you can get.
Can we have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Sec. Ano ba yan? Can we put a face to this project? Yeah, but the 9, we know what the 9 are. We have the list, but we don't know. Ang tanong ni Frank, ano pa yung madadagdagan in the next? Can we know what's the? I just asking for half. But you're giving me numbers. Well, it's abstract, very abstract. I think he wants to know what. So what do I tell Frank? You do not have to listen to tomorrow. Si Vincent may listahan. Sec? Sec Sani? Sec Sani? We won't have the list till tomorrow. We won't have the list till tomorrow.
Sir, 2% lang siya nung
Yan kalagay, 2%. Oh. This is.
How soon can you? Why did you do it before you came? You're gonna give it tomorrow. What's the difference? Do it tomorrow. What's the difference? No, what's the difference? We're doing it now. Your budget is quick. Hindi mo masagot yung tanong. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, in response to the earlier question of the gentleman from Iloilo, the distinguished minority leader, for the list of the flagship projects and the status, I was told, and the minority leader has graciously agreed to postpone his request for tomorrow because the agencies say they will have the complete list by tomorrow because it is still undergoing finalization. If that's all right with the minority leader, Your Honor.
That's certainly fine with us, Mr. President. We just hope to have information as to which of the 75 projects have been abandoned,
Yes, Your Honor.
which new projects have been included, and the stages of development of these projects which remain in the list.
Yes, it's a very valid inquiry, and I'm surprised they don't have the information right now, Mr. President.
That's okay. We can wait until tomorrow.
Yes, Your Honor.
But
They promised to give it tomorrow.
In the meantime, can I be parochial but also national? And I'm referring to one of those projects which is in the Build program, part of the 75 projects
Yeah.
which were listed before. This is the Panay Guimaras Negros Bridge. You know, Mr. President, coming from Western Visayas, this is particularly important to us because first of the economic development that can result out of connecting these three islands, Panay, Guimaras, and Negros, particularly in the case of Guimaras, where the poverty incidence is very high, the development is very hard, but whose potential is very high, particularly in the tourism sector, because there are a lot of good resorts there which cannot be developed because of lack of transportation. And talking about transportation, as you recall, Mr. President, recently, 31 of my province mates drowned because of the
Dumangas, Your Honor.
of the accident on a 15-minute crossing between Iloilo and Guimaras. Those 31 lives could have been saved if we have this bridge. So firstly, just for the record, the Iloilo-Guimaras portion of the Panay-Guimaras-Negros Bridge, the crossing is about 2.5 kilometers, and the approaches would make a total of 4.6 kilometers as the length of the bridge. May we know exactly where we are in terms of this project? Number one, how much will the total project cost? And we can break it down to Iloilo or to Panay Guimaras and Guimaras Negros. Because the Guimaras Negros portion is quite, how do you call this? The length is quite challenging. That's 26 kilometers. And therefore, we can understand the difficulty or the length of time that is needed before we finally decide on that. But the Iloilo-Guimaras portion is manageable. May we know if, number one, if this project is still in the list?
Yes, Your Honor. That has not been shelved, definitely. And in fact, they are telling me that it is proceeding, and their submission to NEDA for ICC review and approval in November 2019, so this month, Your Honor.
Submitted, who submitted?
The feasibility study, Your Honor.
Okay. The feasibility study was done by some Chinese company?
China Communications Construction Company, or CCCC Limited,
All right.
Your Honor.
And when was the feasibility study completed? Did you say November of this year?
It will already be submitted, Your Honor. It was commenced in November of last year, and what the information I've been given is that they will submit it to NEDA for ICC review and approval in November 2019.
So has it been, today we're November, has it
Opo.
been submitted to NEDA? Because I know it takes time for the ICC to review this. Has it been completed? In effect, you were saying that the feasibility study has been completed.
It's been completed, Your Honor. Yes.
Yes. And submitted to the ICC for approval.
Not yet. DPWH will submit, Your Honor.
Uh, so it has not yet been. What is preventing its submission?
I have it was finished in September of this year, Your Honor.
Sorry?
The FS was finished in September of this year.
The feasibility study was finished in September.
Yes,
of
and now the
2000.
DPWH is reviewing the.
The DPW is reviewing.
Yes.
And
They will be the one to forward it to NEDA.
All right. Well, you see this, I'm raising these questions because I know the length of time that would lapse before a foreign assisted project can come into
Yes,
fruition.
that's why it's good that you're following it up, Your Honor, because otherwise it might fall in the cracks, Your Honor.
Yeah. Okay, so
But Secretary of Finance is pledging that it's very high priority, Your Honor.
just because I'm the one on the floor. After I'm off the floor, I'm sure the priority is very low. In any case, would the gentleman sponsor be at liberty to give us a general idea of whether or not these projects are feasible economically and
Which projects,
construction-wise?
Your Honor? Which ones?
The Panay Negros, the Panay Guimaras.
Definitely very feasible. It's 2.5 kilometers. Some of the bridges
No,
are
would-
30 kilometers. Some
No,
are.
would that answer be based on the actual result of the feasibility study?
Okay. So they're saying the design is finished, and that's what's being evaluated by the DPWH. The design, the physical design, and then they will. That's when they evaluate the cost, Your Honor. The agency.
So there's nothing certain yet at this point.
Not 100%, but very good chance, according to the secretary.
Please, please.
Mr. President, may I, if I have permission of Senator Dillon, interject? It's what we call the One Visayas Bridge Program. Has been a dream of ours for a long, long time. As a matter of fact, in 2007, it's called the One Visayas Bridge Program, which connects basically Cebu to Negros Island to Guimaras to...
There will never be one Visayas because Iloilo, they cannot agree amongst themselves already.
Well, theoretically, that is what we want to happen. And we support that bridge crossing Iloilo to Guimaras. Remember the recent mishap wherein about 25 or 31 people had died
I remember, Your
crossing with a
they were trying to land in the Dumangas port.
yeah,
yes.
large bangka, trying to cross from Guimaras. But it would be feasible, may I suggest, Mr. Secretary, it would be more feasible if you connect it to Negros Island. Because then, with all due respect to Guimaras, no? It's a small island community, but it would be more feasible that it's Iloilo, Guimaras to Negros. Because then, goods and tourism to and fro the island will make it very prosperous, these two areas. So, we're in full support of that. Matagal na yung plano na yan, Secretary. Sana naman mag-groundbreaking bago matapos ang term ni Presidente. That's the goal. Because at least if you build it, a portion of it, we're hoping that the next administration, whoever it may be, will continue the program. Mr. Secretary,
Yes.
Mr. President.
Just to supplement that, in fact, the project is Panay Guimaras, Guimaras Negros.
Negros, that's correct.
That is PGN of Bridge Network.
Yes.
And I am not even, how much would the whole
Yes.
bridge
If I may,
project-
Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Dillon, the idea was Bohol connecting Olango Island to Cebu, Mactan,
Yes.
and then below Cebu in Santander, which is the tip of Cebu, connecting to Dumaguete, which is about 5 nautical miles, which is short compared to the bridges in Macau and in China and all that. And then from there, it will go to Bacolod or Pulupandan to Guimaras, Iloilo, and therefore, theoretically, you can have breakfast in Tagbilaran and dinner in Boracay. Can you imagine that?
Yes.
If we had that for tourism.
Senator
OMG.
Gatchalian will enjoy that.
Oh, yeah. With his girlfriend, di ba?
Yes.
Breakfast in Tagbilaran,
Yes, Your Honor.
dinner in Boracay.
Yeah.
Everybody here in this room agrees with me. It will be a game changer for tourism and development for
It
that
would be, Your
area.
Honor, I agree.
Sana this will be the highlight of the Duterte administration before he
That will be remembered for hundreds
steps
of
down.
years
Yes,
to come.
absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my dear colleague.
Mr. President, that would be the dream. But let's go back to earth. As we talk today, how much is the Iloilo Guimaras Negros project? How much will it cost? Just off the top of your head. This is about the total program cost.
The DPW is just saying it's 211 billion. Mr.
How
President.
much?
211 billion.
Did you hear that, Senator? 211 billion for the Iloilo Guimaras Negros. So you're still dreaming, huh? That's why we want to go back to earth. How 200, are we certain about that figure, sir?
Because the LBMRO is giving me a figure which is 211 billion. The one from NED is 27 billion. So I just placed both on the record, Mr. President. I don't know. I don't know which is the more accurate one.
No, that's too much. That's too much of a discrepancy between 27 and 200.
It's a big gulf. It's as long as the
As the bridge.
distance between.
No, let's take this seriously. I mean, this. Huh?
Which is it? Why does DPH give us 211?
I know you saw this. Yeah.
97 point.
There is a third number as being pointed out by the Senate President pro tempore. This is the NEDA document. Huh?
Sir, 97.
The cost is 97 billion.
I think that was the initial submission of DPWH, Your Honor.
DPWH ba ito?
Sir, NEDA po yun.
This is NEDA, not DPWH.
The submission po yan.
It was submitted to NEDA by DPWH, 97.
Would you want to discuss this again tomorrow after you get a more accurate?
Perhaps we can discuss it with DPWH when their budget is taken up, Your Honor. I'm also the sponsor, so we can continue it during, just on that specific matter. But we've been given assurance that it's not one of those that will be shelved. And I think that's the main concern of the gentleman from Iloilo, Your Honor.
No, not only that it will not be shelved, but I don't know when it will be implemented, given even the fact that we do not know how much it will cost. So anyway, now we will go back to the build program, including the 75 flagship programs tomorrow. But in the meantime, can we go on the general principles, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor.
First, what is on the board is our GDP growth rates from 2010 to 2018. Can the good sponsor confirm that if this on the accuracy of this?
Tama, di ba? Yes, Your Honor. It is accurate.
Sorry?
Yes, it is accurate, Your Honor. 6 ba? Di ba 5 yung 2018?
Accurate? Okay, now,
6.2. It's accurate, Your Honor.
okay. The next slide on, now this is the data on year-on-year direct investments, showing again a decline. Would again the gentleman confirm this?
The quarter 2, correct? We're verifying, Your Honor.
Sorry?
We're verifying if the number.
Okay.
Are the numbers correct? Are the numbers correct? No, there's no 17. It's only 18 and 19.
In fact, Mr. President,
We're just verifying that 2018 is correct, Your Honor, according to the Secretary.
Well-
Because you add the two figures, it's roughly almost 10 billion. $10 billion. We're just verifying the 2019 figure.
well, in fact, while you are verifying, I want to place of record that the central bank indeed confirmed that the FDI inflow has weakened, as carried out in the
Yes, that's correct. That's correct, Your Honor.
two business page headlines today in the Inquirer and the Star, where the common headline was that the FDI inflows slowed for the sixth month this year.
That's correct, Your Honor.
So we would like to confirm from the good sponsor if, in fact, this chart would really be accurate in terms of the decline in FDIs.
Again, we're waiting for the retrieval of this data, which is we consider very basic and fundamental
Yes,
data. So we're
yes.
surprised that it's quite slow in the retrieval. But definitely, you're correct that it has declined, Your Honor,
No.
as a result primarily of the trade war, Your Honor.
So the if we are in agreement that there is a decline in the economic growth, could we place of record in the view of the good sponsor why there is this decline, both in terms of growth and in first in terms of our GDP growth?
Well, I think we had to cut back our. They had to renew their or revise their forecasts, especially for exports, Your Honor. I think from 57 it became 51 billion.
No,
Among
but
others,
if you go back to the earlier slide, the forecasting is already 2000, starting from 2016, it keeps on going down, and therefore it's no longer a question of forecasting, but actual fact. Why is this going down? This is not forecasting anymore. This is actual. And in fact, the only one that is that may involve forecasting is 2019, because we're talking about the whole year here. But for 2019, the first 3 quarters would also indicate a decline in our GDP growth, so that
Yes. The gentleman is correct, Your Honor, Mr. President. There's a contraction in 2019 because of the GDP. In the GDP, the G component, the government component, was absent for the first few months of the year.
yes, we'll go into that later, but just for the record, the first semester of 2019 saw a growth rate of only 5.2%, which is again lower than last year.
5.5, Your Honor. 5.5.
Huh?
5.5.
Oh, no, that's the second quarter. I'm talking about the first semester, first 6 months.
Semester. I don't think. I think it's around 5.5.
I am looking at the government publication, the technical notes. It is 5.2 for the first.
Maybe they don't read their own publications, Your Honor.
They don't believe in their own publication. We have a problem then.
5.5 is what they're sticking to. 5.5, Your Honor. Maybe they made a typographical error, Your Honor.
Sir, the 5.5 is for the second quarter. I am talking about the first semester. It's 5.2.
5.55 kasi 5.6 plus 5.5. So you average it out, 5.55.
Yeah, let's see.
First quarter, 5.6.
Yeah.
The first quarter was 5.6, Your Honor, and
That's
the second
correct.
quarter was 5.5. So if you average it out, 5.55, Your Honor.
Oh, can I show to the good sponsor this publication of the government? 1 minute suspension.
Yes, Your Honor.
Session suspended.
So GNI includes remittances. And which was lower. What else was lower?
Okay.
They bought less property abroad. The item they remitted to the Philippines. Okay. So GDP does not include income from abroad. Okay. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, the gentleman was correct, but he was referring to a different index, Your Honor. The 5.2 being cited by the good minority leader represents gross national income,
All right.
which is different from GDP in the sense that gross national income includes income outflows from other countries. So meaning if a Philippine company has an investment in abroad, any inflows into the country are included in GNI. So GNI is 5.2%, GDP is 5.55%.
All right. Okay. Now, having said that, what is now the GDP growth up to the first semester would be 5 point, how much?
5.5, Your Honor.
5.5. And for the third quarter,
6.2, Your Honor.
6.2.
Yes.
What is the targeted growth?
Well,
GDP
the
growth?
target is 6 to 7, Your Honor.
6 to 7%.
Yes, Your Honor.
So what are the chances of our achieving this targeted growth rate? How much do we have to grow?
As mentioned earlier during Senator
how
Lacson.
much do we have to grow in the fourth quarter?
6.7, Your Honor.
How much?
6.7.
Six.
The economy has to grow 6.7 to reach the lower end.
6.7 to reach the lower end.
Yes.
That's quite a challenge, 6.7% growth.
Yes, Your Honor.
When was the last time we achieved the 6.7?
2017, Your Honor.
2017.
One quarter.
Anyway, so,
The whole year.
and so realistically, what is the expected growth rate, about the lower end of the 6 to 7%?
It's a fair chance we'll reach it, Your Honor.
Sorry?
There's a chance we'll reach it, but it will be difficult, as you mentioned.
Okay. Now, for the record, the World Bank predicted that our economic growth for 2019 will be 5.8%. Would the gentleman care to comment about that?
Well, the Secretary is hoping it will be higher, Your Honor. And we're trying to make it higher than that.
All right. Now, what would be the reason why we are not reaching our targeted growth rates?
The delay in the budget was a big factor, Your Honor.
What?
The delay in the budget passage for
Delay
2019
in the budget
was
process.
was a big factor.
Just for the record, Mr. President, I want to place of record that it was the effort of the minority that allowed the president to sign the budget.
Yes.
So that it's because we do recall that there was a very serious deadlock between the position of the Senate, which questioned the constitutionality of what the House did, and the need to have the budget signed. It was this representation who suggested to the Senate President, and the Senate President accepted our advice, that the approval by the Senate President and the transmittal of the Senate President of the budget included a qualification that it did not include, that certification did not include the 75 or so billion which was inserted in the budget. And it was because of that suggestion that we were able to find a compromise on this issue. And the President subsequently exercised his line item veto power in order to approve the budget without the 75 billion which was inserted, 95 billion which was inserted in the budget without even the knowledge of the line agencies. It was because of that system that we were able to sign it even at a late stage of mid-April of this year. Otherwise, we would have stood on our position of the Senate that indeed the budget the general appropriations bill did not meet the constitutional requirements. But having said that, apart from the delay in the execution of the budget, would the gentleman agree that the inability of the bureaucracy to respond to the spending authority is a big factor also in the underspending?
They don't agree with that, Mr. President. They think it's more of the election ban and the delay in the budget, as well as the external uncertainty engendered by the trade war between the U.S. and China. In fact, I think the government spending has picked up in the third quarter, which is a big reason for the larger than expected growth, Your Honor.
Let me quote for the record the view of a respected economist, the former NEDA Director General during the time of President Ramos.
Is that that's not a gentleman here. It's not one of our colleagues, no.
Actually, he's Professor and former Secretary of the NEDA, Silito Habito. In his column, I think this is today, let me quote it for the record. Governments, it implied, meaning the underspending, it implied that the government's capacity to implement its planned infrastructure projects could be the bigger problem, rather than simply the delay. Would and here, Secretary Habito looks at the disbursement rates. The disbursement rates of the Department of Public Works and Highways is only 34.1% in 2017 and 39.7% in 2018. Worst is the Department of Transportation, where they even declined from disbursement rate of 25.6% in 2017. This went down to 23.8% in 2018. Since this is a media report, can the gentleman confirm that the underspending in the DPWH and the Department of Transportation?
Can you give me this so I can... What's EDC?
For the record, the reason why we are bringing this out is because the government spending constitutes about 20% of our gross domestic product.
That's correct,
If
Mr. President.
government spending is not meeting targets, our GDP growth would be adversely affected. That is why it is very important that we put fire on the belly of our bureaucrats in order to execute the projects for which money is available, money is authorized to be spent, but is not being spent.
DPWH, the disbursement rate for 2017, Mr. President, was 36.3%. For DOTR, it was 39.2%.
Mr. President, these are the figures we cited are COA figures, Commission on Audit figures.
Yeah, figure from DBM.
Sorry?
So we have figures from DBM.
And okay, these are figures from the Department of Budget and Management on the underspending of DPWH and DOTR. It shows a deteriorating ability to spend on the part of the bureaucracy. Since 2017, the disbursement rates of DPWH and DOTR in charge of the Build program consistently been below 45% of their budgets. And on the other hand, the Commission on Audit said that the disbursement rates of these two agencies are even worse. Because if we do not accept that these are valid data, we can never solve the problem.
Your Honor, that's again, 2019 is a bit of an outlier because of the delayed budget. That's why you will really expect a very low disbursement rate. But having said that, there is a catch-up plan in place, and part of that catch-up plan is the bill or resolution that we have filed to extend the validity of the 2019 budget, Your Honor.
No, sir. The extension of the validity of the 2019 budget will not solve the problem. It will only postpone the problem because you still have the same bureaucracy which cannot respond to the spending authority.
There's some
so,
truth to- yes,
you
Your
know,
Honor. Yes, I see your point, Your Honor.
Extending the budget will only make the problem worse because then that will create an attitude on the part of the bureaucracy that even if they do not disburse on time, experience will dictate that we will extend the budget anyway, the effectivity of the budget anyway. So it doesn't help any. I'm sorry to disagree with the good sponsor, but I think it's the extension of the effectivity of the budget will not help in so far as improving the disbursement rates of these two agencies.
Well, I see your point. You're saying it's not a permanent solution. It's only a temporary solution. And the problem will subsist because it's the same bureaucracy and it's the same slow spending. So there really has to be some internal reform, Your Honor. And we hope the DBM, the DOF will be at the forefront of that.
By the way, can the gentleman spread on the record what he understands by the disbursement rate?
Disbursement rate is the...
Because for purposes of our growth rate, the government's spending is concerned.
It's payment over obligations, Your Honor. Payment over obligations times 100%. So
No, the disbursement over obligations
yes,
times 100%.
yes.
And so it is not simply the DBM releasing or downloading, or they call it downloading.
No, Your Honor.
Or releasing to the agencies the amounts authorized to be spent. That would constitute
No, that's only a first step, Your Honor.
disbursement.
Yes, that's
It
not
is
disbursement.
the actual disbursement, actual payment
That's
to
right.
the contractors, etc.
That's correct, Your Honor.
And it would appear from the audit of the Commission audit that indeed there is a very poor disbursement rate on these two biggest infrastructure agencies of this government, the Department of Public Works and Highways and
If the gentleman will allow,
Yes, please.
that's also one reason why we looked at the large increase in the DOTR budget. It's increased by tens of billions. And because of that poor disbursement rate, we decided to transfer some funds to the education agencies. Like DepEd got 6 billion. We transferred, I think, at least 8 billion to CHED, among other agencies, Your Honor.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, Mr. President. Can we have a more definite data on what was transferred from the DOTR and or DPWH to the other agencies with hopefully a higher disbursement rate?
From the right-of-way program of the DOTR, we got almost 9 billion, Your Honor.
Maybe we do not need the data now, but
Yes.
maybe,
We'll furnish you, Your Honor.
Can we provide that so that
Yes, of course, Your Honor.
in our session tomorrow we can continue to analyze that?
Certainly, Your Honor.
Now,
President Pro Tem is recognized.
Mr. President, just a clarification with the interpolator. When you mention the disbursement rate, you're talking about disbursement over appropriation or
No, no, no.
disbursement over allotment?
disbursement over obligations. That's
Over-
what that's what
Okay,
the sponsor
over
said.
obligation.
Yes.
So it's even much lower
It is
the ratio is even much lower if you base it on appropriations.
Yes, Your
Ah,
Honor.
yes, yes,
It's correct, Your Honor.
yes.
What would those numbers be if it were based on appropriation?
Much lower.
11% as far as DOTR? 13?
I would suspect you're correct. The figure would be roughly below 20%, Your Honor. Not more.
Because here it appears, maganda pa yung numero dito eh,
Opo.
at 42%.
mas malaki po
I do
yung
not recall
appropriation.
any year that they've been able to spend 42% of their appropriations.
That's correct, Your Honor.
So that is only based on obligation,
Yes.
not on appropriation.
Yes, Your
No,
Honor.
it is much lower.
It's much, much lower. Thank you.
So, did we have an answer clearly? If it is over appropriation, if it is disbursement over appropriation, what would be the
They're
rate?
computing. They're computing at present, Mr. President.
Oh, sige. Well, yes. Senator
same
Lacson,
topic.
Senator Lacson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of cost-based appropriations or cost-based budgeting is to speed up spending.
Yes, Your Honor.
As we see it now, it has not remedied the situation, the problem, di ba? Hindi man na-cure eh.
We've not gone to a full cash-based yet because of our
Yeah, I know.
uncertainty, Your Honor. So,
Which brings me to the question, is it viable at all? Because sa 2018 nag-start, di ba?
It's-
And 2019, we passed Joint Resolution Number 3 to extend.
yeah. We're only starting
Okay.
this year, Your Honor.
No, pero nagpas tayo ng Joint Resolution to extend the validity, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
And then, here we are again,
Extending, passing.
extending. So ang tanong nga, viable pa ba yung cost-based?
Hirap po talaga. Sa
Actually,
totoo
hindi
lang.
na rin tayo cost-based because we keep on
Yeah,
extending.
it's a hybrid actually now. It's a
Hindi,
hybrid.
pero nagpapas tayo ng joint resolution
Kasi
to
in a strict
extend.
cash-based budget, lahat nung yung obligation, yung disbursement, lahat yon within the fiscal year ho. Pero tayo, yung obligation within the fiscal year, pero yung payment and disbursement pwedeng lumagpas ho ng konti.
And the attendant problem is, magulo yung pag-determine natin o pag-define ng savings. Magulo. Kasi, saan natin i-base yung savings? Sa disbursement?
They're
o
saying
sa
it's an
obligation?
adjustment period. We are in the
Anyway,
period of adjustment.
just an
Your Honor.
interjection,
Tama, but
Mr.
tama. The
President.
gentleman is correct. It's a valid question whether we can do the cash-based, Your Honor.
Okay, before I yield the floor to Senator Recto on a temporary basis, there's just one other item which I would like to discuss.
With the indulgence of the minority leader, just in response to the questions of Senator Rector earlier,
Senator
The-
Recto, yeah.
if you do it over appropriations, I'll wait till he takes his seat, Your Honor. Yeah, for DPWH, the disbursement rate over appropriations would be 39%, and for DOTR it would be 36%. So lower. Tama po si Senator Recto.
Yeah.
Mas mababa po yung rates.
Yeah. So this is a problem that we have to confront if we have to make the budget a real instrument of economic growth. Because remember, Mr. President, that the budget is only an authorization. And, but if the bureaucracy does not utilize the authority given to them by Congress, the budget can never contribute to our economic growth, or at the role of the budget as an instrument of economic growth is not achieved.
That's very correct, Mr. President. And we have to be looking forward also because one option could be to download, because we're looking at the implications of the Mandanas ruling.
Yes, I was going into that.
Okay.
It's good.
Yes.
Going into the Bandanas ruling, do we have a chart on that? Yeah.
Because under the Mandanas ruling, the LGUs will be entitled to more,
That's correct.
a bigger share of the pie,
That's correct.
Mr. President. So one option is to download the funds that have been lodged in the national agencies, to download those like for health and among others to the local governments already, to take it away from the budgets of the national agencies. That's one option, Your Honor.
No, if you apply the Bandanas ruling, the allotment for the national government is reduced in effect.
Yes.
And the funds for the local government units are
That's right.
increased.
Correct.
Just to give you, we studied this, Mr. President. Okay. Without the Mandanas ruling, the 2022 era, without the Mandanas ruling, is approximately 828.6 billion without the Mandanas ruling. But with the Mandanas ruling, our studies indicate that it could go up to 1 trillion? Huh? 1,083 billion, or an increase of 254.4 billion, or a 31% increase. Since the budget is a zero-sum game, what will happen now? And how do we confront this certainty that we will be facing in 2019?
Well, definitely the national government or agency budgets will be affected, and there'll have to be some reapportioning, Your Honor. So maybe, because what we're seeing now, year to year, is an increase in budgets of agencies. Almost all across the board, there's an increase.
Yes.
In agencies.
So services, projects, programs of the national agencies will be affected.
All of them, I think. All of the ones you mentioned.
And isn't that a terrible, doesn't have a terrible consequence on our governance if you reduce, for example, just to be specific, would you look at would the salaries or PS be affected?
PS affected? Di siguro. PS would probably not be affected. It would be
Sorry?
not PS, Your Honor, not personal services.
Will?
That probably won't be affected, Your Honor.
No, but somewhere, somehow, so what will be affected? The capital outlay? The MOE? Somehow, there must be an effect.
you're not gonna fire
As we said, the budget is a zero-sum game. You increase the ERA by 254 billion,
Yeah, I know that.
you have to get it somewhere.
Well, maybe let's try to give a more nuanced answer, Your Honor, Mr. President. PS won't be, I don't think it will be affected in the sense that you have to lay off people, but in the sense of increasing personnel components, perhaps we will have to put a halt on that. I don't think we'll be firing people, Mr. President.
Okay, maybe not, but still the issue is, where do we source the additional requirement under the ERA with this Mandana's decision?
Well, according to the Secretary of Finance, they are looking at 3 options.
Yes.
I think you were there when he mentioned it in the committee, at the committee level, Mr. President. The first is that they will devolve
That's
some of the budget and some of the functions which have already been devolved, like health, agriculture.
Yes.
That's already devolved under the local government code. So those budgets will probably have to be reapportioned. So taken away from national government agencies and given to the share of the LGUs, the increased share of the LGUs under the Mandanas ruling. The second is for Congress to pass a law to amend the local government code and reduce the ERA share from 40 to 30% of national revenues. That's the second option that the DOF is looking at. And the third is to declare an unmanageable fiscal deficit. And then, what happens?
I think those are 3 already.
And then, by force majeure, the 40% share will become 30%.
Yes.
If you ask me, my personal opinion, Mr. President, the first is the easiest, most palatable, least controversial option, Mr. President.
I agree with the good sponsor. The last 2 are simply...
I think they're a bit
with the-
controversial.
Yes.
With the permission of the 2 gentlemen on the floor, just for your information, I did file a bill already looking into this 254 billion by 2022. What I did in my office is to file a bill that it goes to a local build. Hindi pwedeng gamitin sa PS, hindi pwedeng gamitin sa MOE, because essentially it will hit the capital outlay of the national government. We could be spending 250 billion more. So, since there's a Supreme Court decision, and we know 3 years from now that this will go to the local governments, then might as well put there in the law a menu that they can only spend for roads, bridges, so on and so forth, irrigation, whatever it is. It's
Yes.
for the perusal of all the members of the
Yes,
Senate.
but just standing here, I do recall that there were also restrictions on the ability of Congress to allocate the funds in behalf of the local government, as in, for example, they should allocate X% of the ERA for health or X% for infrastructure.
But what we did is, in the local government code, it talks about a 20% development fund,
Yes.
which most of that goes to infrastructure outlay. So
Well,
we followed also, this is new money coming in. This is not taxes collected by the local government. Having said that, then the national government can more or less dictate where the money should be going to.
Yeah, and probably coupled with that would be the devolution of those functions.
Correct.
Which are presently in the national government and funded by national taxes.
That is correct. Thank you.
What does the Secretary of Finance say to that? May we request an answer through the good sponsor?
Well, the Secretary has the three options on the table, but what is his preference?
The last two options are simply not realistic. Declaring an unmanageable deficit will have very serious implications.
Well, he says they're still on the table, but it's up to Congress, I suppose, how to, because at the end of the day, the power of the purse is with Congress, and we have the final touch on the budget, Your Honor.
Maybe
aside from the veto of the president.
In general, as Senator Recto said, the concept of devolving more functions and devolving more fiscal and financial responsibility to the LGUs would be the most appropriate way to go, given the burden that the Mandana's decision would impose on the national budget.
Yes, Your Honor. There will have to be some trimming of funds, Your Honor, especially some of the funds like the ALGU, the LGSF. I think in the future, ano na yon? Those will be ERA already.
Just one more item before we suspend our interpellation. We also see a very sharp decline in the investments, FDIs. As we said, it has declined by about 8.5% in capital investment in the second quarter. Why is this so?
They are pointing to the uncertainty in the macro economy, in the larger economy, because of the trade war, and also because of the policy uncertainty, because of the, I think that refers to the SITIRA, or formerly known as the SITIRA, or the Trabajo Bill.
Okay.
The situation, I think there are some investors who are holding back their investment decisions to see what happens, or what we come up with here in Congress, Your Honor.
I yield the floor to Senator Lacson.
Information, Mr. President. The funding by the national government, as mentioned by the minority leader, yung devolved functions, we estimated yung amount including LGSF, yung mga pinoponda ng national taxes, no? 117 billion. But ang problem not sa ERA, if we fully implement the Mandana's ruling, hindi rin mag-inspire ng development because only 20% is allowed under the local government code for infrastructure. Ang lalaki dyan yung general services because naka-allocate na yan, naka-earmark. 5% would be for calamity, 10% SK, and so forth and so on. So I think there's really a need to amend the some provisions of the local government code if we want to make use of the Mandana's ruling to spur development in the countryside. Because kung 20% lang ang pupwede sa infrastructure, ang lalaki dyan, general services.
That is precisely what I filed,
Yes.
Senator Lacson, yes. To increase the percentage of the ERA given to the local government units for infrastructure purposes.
And probably we can reduce the funding of the devolved functions, the functions devolved to the local government. Imagine 117 billion when Governor Velasco and the other governors went to see us. Ang nire-request lang nila sa under the 2020 budget, 100 billion, di ba? Para lang daw sila makatikim ng Supreme Court ruling do sa bagong era nila. And yet, if we look at the funding for the devolved functions of the local government unit, 117 billion na eh. But we cannot convert this into era kasi nga, hindi 117 billion yung sa infra. They will be able to use only 20% of the 117 billion. So I think further studies should be made along this line. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President, just for the record, we are inclined to adopt the position of the Secretary of Finance that, in fact, we should pass on to the local government units certain identified economic activities with the higher era that they will get. For example, farm-to-market roads. How much would this be in the budget if the good sponsor has an idea? Farm-to-market roads, which can be devolved to the local governments.
Because agriculture is devolved under the.
Yes.
We're
I'm
getting
sorry?
the figure, Your Honor. I think health is another example.
Health is
I
another
think,
example.
We always talk about whenever we ask for new taxes, we always say there is this gap to fund PhilHealth. But with regard to the facilities, I think the local government should also bear their burdens. Your
And
Honor. And schools, they have the special education fund.
yes, public schools, buildings.
Yes,
The regional hospitals with the Department of Health.
that's right.
In other words, the DOH hospitals.
Yes.
This can be devolved.
Yes, so I agree with the line of thinking of the gentleman already, which I think is to devolve a lot of these funds, Your Honor.
Because anyway, the funds will already be there. The concept in the devolution is that we devolve more funds and also more responsibility, because you cannot just have the funds without the responsibility. But just talking about that, just for the record, if you analyze. Let me just finish it. Just one point. You know, we are saying that on 20% of the local government fund is for infrastructure. If you look at the breakdown of this 20%, you will discover that a good portion of the 20% is on PS, on salary, because these are the contractuals for these alleged infrastructure projects are really
Not purely infrastructure.
not purely, in other words, for capital outlay. But having said that, we yield the floor to Senator
Yeah,
Lacson.
just to assist the sponsor and LBRMO,
10 billion,
I have the figures for farm to market. For 2019,
It's about 10
there's 10 billion, 10.2 billion
10.2,
actually.
yeah, that's right.
And the 2020 National Expenditure Program, 9.9 billion. That's only for FMR.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah. We confirmed the amount. It's also what NEDA gave.
Okay, so
We're
you
still
have,
waiting
now,
for LBMRO.
you have now the figures. Gusto mo pa ba yung sa iba, sa health?
Yeah, can you just be on standby, Senator Lacson? Because I think
To provide staff support to the
I think
LBRO.
Attorney Doblon is already half retired.
Okay, as I said, just one final point. This problem of another issue, which is a risk to our growth, or fiscal risk, is this pension cost of the military and uniformed personnel. Just for the record, is it correct to say that in 2020, we will be allocating more for pension than a salary of those in the active service? If we are to follow if we are to look at the data, Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. President, but it would appear that for 2020, proposed budget, 71.8 billion would be for actual salary, and 114.7 billion would be for pension of the MUP. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. President. And it's, the secretary was just remarking that you're paying 3 guys for 1 job because you're paying the one doing the job and the 2 who retired, Your Honor.
And the 2 would get the increases that the first one gets.
It's 1
on a
higher, I
yearly
think.
basis.
When they retire, it's 1 higher, I think.
So what do we intend to do about this? In the proposed budget, already 61.5% of the PS is allotted for retirement, and only 39.5% would be for the salary of those in the of the service. This cannot go on because presently, under our laws, the retirees get the corresponding increase whenever there is an increase of those in the active service. So as we go down the years, this will become worse. I don't know what it will be in 2021, what it will be in 2022 down the line. But certainly we will have probably later armed services consisting more of retirees than those in the active
Yes,
service.
Your Honor.
So what
I
do-
think
what-
you're very familiar, Mr. Minority Leader, because I remember when you were Senate President, there was an effort to cut the indexation at
Yes.
some point when you were Senate President.
That's
And
correct.
I think there is a bill now. I've been informed that there is a bill pending in the House of Representatives to do that, exactly that, to adjust the indexation, to adjust the age, and to mandate contributions also, Mr. President.
Would the Secretary of Finance exercise as much political will on this issue as much as he would exercise the political will and enthusiasm in the tax measures pending before Congress? Because this is, the efforts of the Secretary of Finance will get to nothing insofar as revenue generation is
Hindi naman
concerned.
din sa inyo,
If
hindi
we
affected din
find
sa inyo.
this,
Prospective,
loophole on
prospective.
the other
Prospective.
side of the equation.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of signals here from the military,
I
Mr.
can see
President.
that.
But we're informing them we plan to make it prospective and not retroactive, Mr. President.
Kasi baka bakudeta tayo. But seriously now, can we have for the record just an overall outline of what we intend to do about this? Because this is a problem which has been there since I don't know when, and it's getting worse and worse and worse.
So we'll take a look at that bill that the DOF supports, Mr. President, where they adjust the indexation again, and they will the bill mandates contributions also, mandatory contributions, and adjust the retirable age as well. So. And there's another feature which is to use military properties and to make them productive, income producing, and to use the income for that purpose, dedicated for the pensions, Your Honor.
Well, given that this administration has barely 2.5 years, would the Secretary of Finance recommend to the President the designation of this measure as an administration measure in order to push it in the legislative
Yes,
bill?
Your Honor, yes.
So we expect after this budget is signed that the bill in the House be certified as an administration urgent measure?
Yes, Your Honor.
Medyo mahina yung yes ng sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor. Gugutom na ho. I'm just joking, Your Honor.
O sige, we suspend muna.
No, it's okay, it's okay. I was just kidding, Your Honor.
Okay. No, let's, before I go to the next topic, I think it is best that we suspend our interpretation first. We review our notes, and we can go back later in the day. In the meantime, I think the Senate President pro tempore would like to take the floor when we resume sessions this afternoon.
So we
To
suspend.
my understanding.
We'll defer to the wishes of our colleagues, Your Honor.
Yes.
So we
Major-
suspend our
have a lunch break?
Thank you to the Minority Leader. Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, as agreed yesterday, we'll have lunch breaks from 12 to 2 and resume at 2 p.m. So therefore, Mr. President, I suspend session till 2 p.m. this afternoon, so everyone can
Session
avail of their
suspended
lunch.
Till 2 p.m.
You should. Oh. Why? They're using it for something.